Shivnarine Chanderpaul. Let's talk father and sons cricketers. Last week I was watching the first test match in the India versus West Indies series. The Indians won very easily, but one of the players that caught my eye was Shivnarine Chanderpaul, obviously son of, and he's trying to make his way in the test arena. Unfortunately, he had two rather unfortunate dismissals. In the first innings, he was strangled down the leg side, and in the second innings, he absolutely smacked a short ball, which was destined for the backward square boundary, but the fieldsman took a fantastic catch. Anyway, it got me thinking about other father-son combinations that have played Test cricket and the difference between the two of them. Let's start with the Chanderpauls. There is no question that father Shivnarine is one of the greats of West Indies cricket. He played 164 Test matches, currently the 7th on the list, not the West Indies, but worldwide. He scored just under 12,000 runs at an average of 51.4 and scored 30 centuries. That's a great career in anyone's book. I think because he had a really unusual, unorthodox style, we sort of forget about him in the shadow of Brian Lara. Shivnarine hasn't had the greatest of starts to his Test career. At the time of making this video, he is playing his 12th Test match. He has 1 century in that time, and he turned that into a double. Now, some people will say that was against Zimbabwe, but I would ask, how many Test centuries have you scored? The Test century is still a Test century. Next, Cairns. No, I'm not talking about the subtropical city in far north Queensland. I'm talking about Father Lance and son Chris. If you are like me and are of a similar vintage, you would have grown up with the excitement of seeing the burly, Excalibur-wielding Lance Cairns come out in his beige uniform to smash the spinners to and generally over the fence. He was a real cult hero here in New Zealand. Son Chris is in another class altogether. He could also hit the ball over the fence, but did it with such a good technique, and he was a far better bowler than his father. It was unfortunate that injury played a major role in his career. The Pollocks. Shaun Pollock is one of the greats of modern day cricket. When your batting average is higher than your bowling average, that suggests a fine all-rounder. Just under 4,000 runs and over 400 Test wickets suggests that he will always come into the conversation about the best all-rounder ever. I don't know much about his father, Peter Pollock, but 116 wickets in 28 Test matches, an average of 24, suggests that he knew what he was doing. His first-class batting average was in the mid-20s, so not as good as son Shaun, but not bad for a bowler. Of course, when we look at the Pollock family, we can't go past Graeme Pollock, Shaun's uncle, and of course Peter's brother. He is without a doubt one of the greats of cricket. His abbreviated Test career had an average of over 60. He had 64 first-class centuries with over 20,000 runs in those first-class matches. And that's a testament to how good he really was. I'll put a link of one of his innings in the description below, so check that one out. He's big, he's bad, he's better than his dad. Stuart Broad. Was he better? His father was an opening batsman. The other one, the son, was an opening bowler. Can you compare them? I don't think father, Chris's career was anything to write home about, but he did have a great series in 1986-97 when Mike Gatting took his team to Australia and retained the Ashes. Chris Broad scored 3 centuries in that series, and he also scored a century in another test match that they played a year later in the bicentennial test match, so he had a real affinity with Australian pitchers. But going back to the Ashes, he was a major factor in the 1986-87 Ashes and England retaining the Ashes. Stuart Broad took 604 test match wickets and is currently 5th on the list of wicket takers, behind players like Murali and Shane Warne. On occasions, and I can think of a game against New Zealand and his 8 for 15 game against Australia, he would get on a roll and the batsmen were powerless. He just went through the lineup like a knife through butter. He did have his moments though. Why didn't Broad walk? Also, Stuart's highest score is more than his father's. I'm sure his father has no problem with that anyway. Finally, let's come back to New Zealand and talk about the Hadlees. I don't think we can argue against the fact that Sir Richard Hadlee is the GOAT of New Zealand cricket. Younger people might say, oh, it's Kane Williamson. Kane Williamson is GOAT, but sorry. Richard Hadlee will always be number 1 in my book. Richard's father, Walter, was captain of the New Zealand cricket team, and he took the team to England in 1949 and came back to these shores with a 0-0 draw over 4 test matches. Now, people in 2025 might say, 0-0? That sounds like a really boring result. But at the time of England thrashings over the Kiwis, it was a great result for New Zealand cricket. Now, in the Hadlee family, there was also Dale Hadlee, who played 26 test matches, and Barry Hadlee, who was an opening batsman, who played 2 one-day internationals in 1975. Both Dale and Barry had significant first-class careers, but as I said, Richard was the GOAT. Now, people overuse that word now, but it is 1,000,000% appropriate for Sir Richard Hadlee. Who is going to be the next great father-son combination? Any ideas? Put them in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.